Good afternoon. I call this meeting to order for the City of Charlottesville.
And I'm calling the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors to order for the Monday, September 9 joint meeting with City Council.
Welcome, everyone. We're glad to have you here today for our joint meeting with the county. We have decided to have these more frequently to get more things accomplished. So this is, I think, our first time meeting since we've made that decision. We're glad to have all of you here with us today.
Likewise, I'll echo the mayor's sentiment. We certainly are here interested in having, it looks like we're going to get an abundance of information. So I'll hand things off to Team Richardson and see where we go.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the Board of Supervisors, as well as Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. Thank you for having us today. And I'd just like to say we put on our uniform together today so we could look like our partnership. So, but as you mentioned, we do have a full complement of items for discussion today. And at our last meeting, towards the end of it, there were three topics that you wanted us to bring back. That was to talk about affordable housing, transit, and climate action. All three of these items, as you can see, can be found on the agenda under the joint discussion section. And then secondly, you request a follow-up to the following items: the hydraulic SAP implementation, Sunset Bridge maintenance, the housing voucher programs, minority business support, equity collaboration, and Rivanna River crossing. And they'll be all discussed within our information item section. And also, too, as a little background to that, we did distribute some memos to both City Council as well as the Board of Supervisors for your review pertaining to those items. And the last items up for discussion are also the joint boards and commissions, the joint CIP projects, and revenue sharing. So as you can see, there's a number of items for discussion. The items that we don't get to today, we can always bring those back since we're going to be meeting a little bit more regularly than in the past. So I'm not going to belabor the point. We want to move forward. If we would start to talk about the joint boards and commissions, and I'll turn it over to our city attorney, John Blair.
Excuse me just for 1 second. I forgot to mention that Councilor Bellamy is en route, but he's running late. So just wanted to make everyone aware of that.
Thank you. Is Ms. Kilroy here? Do we go for slides, or is there a go up? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. A good speaker doesn't need a good introduction. They need a quick conclusion. So hopefully this will be short. This really should be brief, but Greg and I talked about over the summer. There was a question that came up about an appointment to the Albemarle Charlottesville Regional Jail. And during the course of our discussion, it seems like this has been an informal process through the years with a number of these regional bodies, and that there are specifically 6 bodies that have joint appointments by the County Board of Supervisors and the Charlottesville City Council. But none of the documents really prescribe a procedure for how that joint appointment goes. I think traditionally it's sort of worked that one board or one body would appoint the joint member for one term. The other body's responsibility was to concur. And then after that term completed, like we saw with the jail board recently, then the other body makes the appointment and sends it to the corresponding body for approval. Greg and I talked about this, and again, this has sort of historically not been very well defined, so we had a recommendation that we'd like to put before both bodies that would have the county and city attorneys draft a memorandum of understanding in which the city and county agree to provide at least 90 days to the other body to consider a joint appointment recommendation. And the reason for this is we probably want the memorandum to also memorialize each one of the public bodies that has a joint appointment, kind of document whose quote-unquote turn it is to appoint. But what this 90-day period provides both the City Council and the Board of Supervisors is the opportunity that if there was an objection by one body or the other, there's at least 90 days to discuss the possible joint appointment if there are any objections from either body. And this, again, kind of creates an atmosphere that doesn't lead to sort of one body feeling jammed up or feeling like they have to appoint or that they don't want to ask any questions. This 90-day period provides both bodies an opportunity that if there is a candidate or two candidates they'd like to discuss amongst themselves to have that discussion rather than simply the City Council or Board of Supervisors makes an appointment and they send it to the other body with 2 weeks' notice. And so hopefully, if both bodies are in agreement, Greg and I can work on drafting this memorandum. And I think that can help clear up some of the joint appointment process questions that have kind of been unwritten for 20, 30, 40 years with some of these bodies. But we're happy to take questions or proceed if both bodies concur in that.
Go forth.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, like I said, short and sweet.
Yeah. You're a great speaker, John.
On to the Academy Awards next.
Right.
Moving forward, we will have, next coming up is Chrissy Hamill and Ryan Davidson to talk about the revenue sharing program.
Thanks, everyone. Hopefully I can be as quick as John was. Have just a few slides here. Just kind of go briefly over an overview of the agreement, the distribution amounts for 19 and 20, and then the regional partnership services. You know, we really wanted to focus on the partnerships and the joint activities between the city and the county, and highlight how the revenue sharing dollars make these activities possible and flourish. So the city-county revenue sharing, a jointly signed agreement for many years now. There's a formula that's focused on and based on several factors, including both the city and county assessments, city and county tax rates of each locality, the overall population and population growth. Funding for is allocated for the city between the capital and the operating budget, but we'll go into that in a little more detail. And again, as I said, really focusing on the support for the regional activities. So within the city allocations, the city does not allocate or designate the dollars specifically to programs or projects. How we have done this in the past, at least for the last 15 years since I've been with the city, is we've taken the county allocation, the county payment each year, and allocated it between our general operating budget and our capital fund budget. For FY19, that was about 8.7% of the total. The city-county revenue sharing was 8.7% of the total general fund revenue coming into the city. And then for FY20, it was roughly 7.5%. So as you can see, it's been a decrease. And since 2011, we've been seeing a steady decrease in the amount of revenue sharing dollars coming from the county over to the city. There was 1 year where it went up about $80,000, but we've been averaging about a $345,000 decrease on an annual basis coming over to the city. Again, as I said, since we really don't allocate to specific projects or programs, we wanted to look at some of the areas where the general funding dollars go. And on the next few slides, we'll look at the capital efforts on the next slide. But as I said before, we're really focusing on the regionalism and the joint activities. Within our general fund, there are several things that we do, the city does, that are joint activities and regional activities. Shared park operations, garden towels, the All of our parks are regional parks. They're not considered city-only parks. There's plenty of recreational activities and programs that are open to all both city and county residents and everyone within the region. Transit system is a regional activity that I'm sure we'll continue to hear more about, and we'll continue to build that regionalism within that we do together. There's public safety agencies such as ECC, the jail, the courts. As I said, 8% of the overall general fund revenue is this city-county revenue sharing dollar, so that also goes to support police, fire, all these other activities that benefit both city and county residents and provide a regional aspect, as well as housing and employment, which is some things we'll hear about a little bit later in our presentations, as well as all the regional youth and children and activities. Capital projects. So again, as with the general fund dollars, there's lots of joint activities and joint facilities that are owned by the city and the county, such as the Darden Park, Ivy Creek Recreation. There's other buildings within the portfolios of both the city and the county. Public safety things, ECC, fire equipment, all these things that are joint. Road and infrastructure. This is another one of those areas where we'll hear more about this later as we get into some of the small area plans and other things that we have funded, bike and pedestrian, trail connections, all these things that happen around the outsides of the city and right next to the county and provide these joint regional connections. And then other just joint governmental projects. We've got such as the Senior Center happening, the PVCC Advanced Technology Center. All these things are regional efforts that are between the city and the county that we stick and we have our revenue sharing dollars go towards and fund. Now with that, that was all I had on these presentations. If there's any questions or anything, we can answer those, but short, sweet.
Are there any questions?
You mentioned that you don't allocate to particular programs. Is that by law or by your policy or your custom to do that?
It is, since, like I said, since I have been here, the 15 years I've been with the city, we have always broken out our allocations between these two pots. It comes in as one general pot of revenue, and we as a policy have dedicated it to these two sources.
So policy is the answer.
I guess I'm a little confused, and I think just for clarity's sake,
Sure.
the city and the county have a lot of jointly owned or jointly administered projects that we both put money into, and many of those you've listed, or at least some of them you've
Sure.
listed up there. We also have, for example, the Regional Transit Partnership, which really right now is a partnership that has determined how much money Albemarle County pays to the city for transit service. I think when it's, with all, just trying to straighten this out for our public, because the way it's been presented, it really looks like all of these projects, and maybe it was just the way I saw it, or the way it was presented, looks like many of these programs are paid for through revenue sharing monies, when in reality, many of what the programs that you have listed up there have a payment actually from the city and from the county, and are separate from the revenue sharing money, I thought. Now, having said that, I get revenue sharing and I understand it. I'm not here to fight it. It's a contract. And in all fairness, I drive on city roads. I use occasionally city parks. I understand, but I think for clarity for our public, we need to explain better and not fold it all into one presentation, because I think it adds to the confusion. Any?
So I don't think it's adding to the confusion. Let's take the Regional Transportation Partnership, for example. We had a conversation early on about removing revenue sharing from the conversation and coming up what the new criteria would be for how Albemarle County would present those dollars. So this, I think we need to have a discussion about whether you all would be able to influence how this money is spent, because I think that's the real conversation.
Well, and it may very well be, because.
So I think from our end, we've said no. right?
Yes.
And so
Yes.
it's still no unless I'm
Yes.
missing.
But you're not getting at what, Nakaya, that I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if you go back and look at some of these projects, I just want to make sure for the Almar, because I don't think that your city residents spend any time at all thinking about revenue sharing, and I understand that. But I will say that our constituents in the county ask us questions about it a lot. And so I just want to make sure when we're describing jointly owned facilities, or the regional jail, that Albemarle County is paying a certain amount of money for the regional jail per population. The city is paying a certain amount of money per population. And that perhaps you all are using your revenue sharing money for that. I don't want to get into all that. That's not up to me. But I'm confused. I'm just a little concerned that the community in Albemarle is going to get a takeaway from this that's maybe not as accurate as could be if it had been presented in a little different way. That's all I'm saying. And I think you're nodding your head.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, and again, our intention in presenting it this way was to focus on the regional and the joint activities between the city and the county.
I think
not
that's
place
why
value
we're
statements
here.
on-
That's why we're here, is to focus on joint partnerships that we can do together. But when we start out with revenue sharing and then it's presented as if it's all joint, I think it doesn't accurately portray the way some of these projects are being paid for, or organizations, facilities. Ann, go ahead.
Well, just two thoughts, and that was, I thought we were going to hear something based upon the legislation.
Yes.
Which did direct that we would find out where things were allocated in specific terms. And secondly, when constituents in the Whitehall District hear this discussion, they're going to say, every one of those things you mentioned, I have to still pay for when I go to town. So it's not as if revenue sharing money is being provided into these very laudable activities, and then somehow that service is being provided to county residents.
But our
having already
residents-
paid for it once in their taxes and therefore in their revenue sharing.
But we pay too, so it's not, there isn't anything up here that I'm aware of that city residents get for free that county residents don't have to pay for either.
I think this.
So I think there's a-
I think we're having a conversation that sort of doesn't, let's see how to put this. I'm just going to, in a way, I'm going to repeat what Diantha said. I mean, we put money into this too. You guys put money into them. They're all worthwhile.
Yeah.
They're great. We want to continue on with them. They don't seem to, it seems to be sort of disconnected from the revenue sharing.
Doesn't answer.
The revenue sharing agreement. And I'm not trying to get into that either. I think that's just the point.
Right.
Is that this is great and we all agree that those things are good. But it's not necessarily answering any questions about the revenue sharing agreement.
Right.
Which I think is what
And I thought that was what Ann referenced the law. I thought that was what the issue was about, that we were going to have a discussion about it. I know, for example, I would love for,
So can we get some clarification from the attorneys on what the legislation says that we are not following through on?
Well, I think this report does meet the minimum requirements, which are to report the uses of such funds by the localities.
And I
So-
concur, this does meet the statutory obligation.
In a general way.
in a very general way.
Yeah.
Which is the
I
way
guess-
that you've chosen to do it, not, that you could do it more directly if you chose.
I guess I'm not clear of an example of specifically how you think it should be done. They do their budget, the city, I mean, I'm not involved in them doing their budget, but they do a budget for what they think is important. And a lot of those things have overlap. What would be an example of something that was exceptional? Are you saying, like, building a park and allowing county residents to use it? I'm not sure what you're trying to, it's so muddled to me, I don't see any way you can pull things out and say this is specifically because of the revenue sharing. any more than the legal agreement that someone makes when they buy a house that they're going to pay taxes. They don't know where their taxes are going. You know, we're paying our taxes, so to speak, or our legal obligation to the city. It sounds like you're asking for some sort of control over it.
Nope. Accounting.
Well, what's an example of how it could be done differently?
Well, I think, I mean, this is very similar to the conversation we had a year ago.
It is. It is.
It's very similar to the conversation we had a year ago. I mean, at the end of the day, the minimum requirement has been met from what the attorneys have said. To provide something beyond that would be up to City Council to do. I disagree that we're trying to influence the projects. I think last year it came up that we were hoping for a more specific accounting of where the dollars go to help us field questions with county residents that say the $14 or $15 million went to X, Y, and Z. But the report out would have to be more specific for us to be able to do that. But that's different than us saying where the dollars should go. It's asking where did the dollars go.
But I think that's also different than changing the narrative, because if this is an agreement and if you all don't think that you all should have to pay, then the conversation that you all have with your residents may be influenced by how you all feel about the payment annually versus just explaining the agreement that's in place.
Well, I don't disagree that we have to make the payment. I've accepted that. Our county residents may not have accepted that, all of them, but it is an obligation. It was voted on, it was passed. So we know this payment's going to occur every year. It's just simply a matter of saying, when those dollars go over, where do they go? And we don't want to say because we think it should go here, or we think it should go there. We would simply like to be able to say to our residents, here's where it went. And that is them seeing where their dollars go and what it goes to. And this is, what Diantha's getting at is this is very general in nature. And it would be great to have something a little bit more specific so that I could say to my residents, $15 million spent on this. And I don't get a say in that. That's up to you. That's your money.
Yeah, I think really the question that some of us are struggling with is the expectation with the new state code that there would be greater transparency. And, what we're finding at the end of the day is when constituents ask us, well, where did the revenue sharing go? We don't know more now than we did a year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago as to where it went. And I don't think it's unreasonable for us as the government that pays the revenue sharing. I know we had this conversation when I first joined the board, and I heard this 4 years ago. Isn't there some way in which there could be some signage that says this project partly funded with Albemarle County revenue sharing dollars? It's that kind of thing that people in the county are looking for in terms of the accountability side and the transparency of the money they donate. None of us on this side of the aisle here are questioning the agreement. That isn't the basis of anything that's being said here about that. That's said and done. But the fact of the matter is, I think all of us thought that the state code changes last year would have created a greater degree of transparency so that instead of getting a general report of activities that the county and the city jointly participate in together, we would have seen where some of the money that is directly attributable to revenue sharing, where it might be going into certain categories and certain functional areas that are beneficial for people in the county. That's all.
So this agreement finalized something for the county, right? The annexation, it finalized on your end. For you all to think the cumbersome process of going through these and saying this is what you would have to possibly pay if revenue sharing dollars weren't a part of the equation to satisfy that there is some direct benefit from you. I don't think, and even though that could just be one example, we talked about this with the regional transportation partnership. That's a cumbersome process that you are asking us for when what in return, could we ask you to do more than you're doing? I think instead of just looking at this as this is the agreement, if you all are not trusting the process for some reason, then that's part of the discussion. But asking us to ask our staff to go through what-if scenarios is not acceptable.
I don't think we're looking for a what-if scenario. I think it's really very simple to say, if you are constructing something, you are rehabilitating, you're revising something, and you're spending
But
dollars.
that's just one ask, because I've heard a different ask from Ann, and Diantha and I are both on the RTP, and there was a different discussion. Well, you are too, but there was a different discussion in that meeting also. So what you're asking is just one part of what I have heard just the short amount of time I've been on council as the ask for what is happening with the dollars.
Well, if in fact we bring up the RTP, if the city were, in this hypothetical, were to direct $10 million over the RTP, and you could say $5 million of the $10 million that you're directing over the RTP is actually coming out of what you received from revenue sharing, then that would be something that would be beneficial for our residents to know. Now, you don't need to account for it. All you have to do is publicly agree as a city council that you would have divided up that $15 million for the coming year. You put $5 million here, $5 million here, $5 million here, and you've covered $15 million. And then our residents will say, oh, okay, that's where the $15 million went. But you see, what we confront is a kind of amorphous situation where inadvertently, with the presentation today, we end up with kind of a fog machine where it becomes more amorphous, and we can't differentiate between where the money that's going into revenue sharing and joint activities that are already customarily funded by the city and by the county for the benefit of all of our residents. And we understand those, but what we're really just trying to get at is attribution of where those dollars go, generally speaking. And you don't have to account for them down to the penny. I don't think anybody would be interested or that pedantic to have that.
So, Madam Mayor, just with all due respect to Supervisor Randolph's comments, the fog machine can sort of be actively constructed here, as opposed to something that you're just reflecting or hearing about in the past. How I think what the presentation does is depict accurately how broad the investments that the city makes that serve county residents so frequently, literally as the geographic center of the community, and how the city has made choices over and over and over again to invest in a very broad range of infrastructure and services that don't draw any geographic distinctions. And so when you look at how broad the investments are with general fund receipts, which are what the revenue sharing plan was set up to do, it goes into the, as I understand it, one of the, I think, highest per capita parks programs that doesn't draw distinctions between county and city residents. Roads, public works, all of the other things you're seeing here, schools, lots of other regional programs. So when we hear political representations that there's a fog machine and we feel like the whole program ought to have been designed differently, that's not what the referendum was. They are general fund revenues that do go into a very broad component. When you say we ought to be able to see an accounting specifically from the city, that's what our budget is. Like, check out the city's budget, check out what we actually spend on, because almost every area that we invest in, Supervisor Randolph, is available to county residents. And that's why the report is as broad as it is.
So I think and Mike's point is good. It's right here in front of me, the budget. So 10.4 million went to the operating budget. 4.9, just short of 4.9, got transferred to the Capital Improvement Program Fund, and 400,000 got transferred to Facilities Repair Fund. Now that is a breakdown right there in your budget that says where the county revenue sharing money went. And that's about 15 million bucks, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of report out in a representation like this, with all due respect, seeing just those three details.
That's all we need.
I can go back and say, well, they put 5 million, almost 5 million into their capital improvement program from revenue sharing. 10 million went to their operating budget. 400,000 went to repair facilities. And then that helps me go in and break out further details in those categories would be great. But that, you're right, it's there.
And that's really all we need.
So, any other type of information? I'm sorry, well, that's just the total payment. Of that, of your
different
amount,
than
it's, the capital improvement fund, it's right up top. So, I mean, that type of breakdown is where we're going, well, what are the projects inside of those? I must not have been looking at the screen.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I missed that too, because I was so focused on all of the other.
But that's the kind of reporting out that we're looking for. So I don't know where we got off.
Madam
track.
Mayor, may I say
yes, sir.
something,
Yes,
please? Because, again, this is a source of revenue, just as real estate taxes are a source of revenue, just like sales and meals tax are sources of revenue. I don't think you, and we certainly don't, break down by source of revenue specifically what the project is being funded with. So we don't say, for example, that this bridge or this program is funded with a sales tax of a certain percentage. We don't say that that's funded by even the real estate property tax. It's just a revenue stream. And so what you're asking us to do would be something very, very different than what we do for any other revenue stream. The revenue sharing is a revenue stream.
Understood.
And this is breaking it down in a way that I don't even think our other revenue streams get broken down quite, well, do they get broken down between capital and operating?
No.
No, okay. So this has a level of specificity than any other.
We could, and I don't disagree, this was the same points that were made last year. I'm frankly not asking for anything this year in addition to it. I was trying to work through the conversation that I was hearing.
Mm-hmm.
This could certainly get us off track for the entire meeting. I think it would be best that now that we see where the breakdown of the information is, supervisors, if we could maybe move through the agenda and move past revenue sharing.
And this is very helpful for me. Thank you. As I said at the very beginning, I think our citizens are much more conscious of this than your citizens are, and we're always seeking a way to help explain the revenue sharing agreement to our citizens. So I really appreciate this. I think what happened for at least myself is I got caught up in all those lists of other projects and other organizations that we fund together that seemed a little, that we're actually paying for our share. So maybe the next year when this is presented to us, to break it out a little differently would just be helpful in the presentation. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson.
Moving on to our information items section, we do have the hydraulic SAP implementation. I have Alex Ikafuna and Chris Engel and Chip Boyles.
Good afternoon, councilors and supervisors. Just want to make sure that, as some of you may be aware, last year, the city and the county, together with Virginia Department of Transportation, initiated a joint Highway 29 and hydraulic small area plan. The primary intent of this plan was to prepare a small area plan that includes a land use and transportation components. Where do I? See here. All right. Okay. On March 2017, as part of the project, Advisory panel was established, which includes representatives from the Planning Commission, the City Council, Board of Supervisors, County Planning Commission, and business owners and representatives along the corridor. And a couple of residents and environmental groups were also appointed to this particular panel. And in May 2018, the plan was completed. The City Council approved the plan, and then the city's comprehensive plan was amended so that the small area plan will become part of the comprehensive plan. The County Board of Supervisors also endorsed the plan. They are also in the process of amending their comprehensive plan at this point. What am I doing? Okay. In terms of implementation update, the city and the MPO, Thomas Jefferson MPO, and the county made a considerable effort to submit a smart scale application in 2018. And a combination of projects were submitted by the MPO. The city submitted one application for 250 and hydraulic intersection to improve the sidewalk and the outlet from Mickey Drive and Brandywine. Unfortunately, the projects were not funded. The MPO is currently considering an alternative approach to implementation of the project, as also with the city. We had a discussion a couple of weeks ago regarding the next steps in terms of consideration for funding request, revenue sharing, and the smart scale application, which is coming up in 2020. Here are some of the a combination of a transportation project. In all, there are two major transportation project recommendations, and they are specially distributed within the project activity area. Last year, when the MPO submitted the application for funding, I believe there were three combination of projects worth about between $130 and $158 million. The city submitted for 250 and hydraulic, and the price tag for the city's application was $6.4 million. Unfortunately, it wasn't funded. However, we are looking at resubmitting for the next round of smart scale application. There are some key issues related to this particular project activity area that the supervisors and the city council needs to know. The 2020 smart scale application could not score well enough to be funded or meet the small area plan consideration. For your information, there are about $18 million that is left from as part of as part of 29 solutions that the supervisors and the city council need to take into consideration. We are looking at resubmitting next year, and this $18 million will be part of our down payment or some kind of leverage for the application we'll be submitting. So where the funding goes depends on which project we come up with in terms of submission for the next application cycle. Okay. There's I think as part of MPO long-range transportation planning effort, there is a proposal. One of the proposed projects is to have a bridge across from Zen Road into the Costco. And that project is expected to cost about $38 to $40 million. As part of the long-range transportation plan that MPO has completed, the City Council and the Board of Supervisors needs to weigh in whether the $18 million is going to be used as part of application, smart scale application to fund this particular project. The project does not qualify in terms of, it qualifies, but it does not score well in terms of smart scale. So the only way that particular project is going to be implemented is through the revenue sharing. And the revenue sharing itself is going to cost about $10 million, $5 million for the city and $5 million for the county. I think that's it. Did I miss anything? Are there any questions?
I do have some questions.
Any questions?
Because I just want to make sure I understand that the $18 million can actually be used independent of a smart scale application, or must it be part of the smart scale application? Because I thought we could put that towards a project like a bridge, like Zan Road Crossing.
If our understanding from VDOT is the $18 million could be used if it's a revenue sharing project. That's the only way a project would not have to go through smart scale.
Okay.
Because revenue sharing projects are legislatively excluded.
So that's helpful.
That is very helpful, because that's a
Yes.
new wrinkle that I didn't
That's right.
realize.
That's actually good news.
And so the total cost of the building of a bridge like that would be then what,
It's about
roughly?
38, I think it's $38 million.
It's 8 million?
38.
38 million,
$38
okay.
million. So, the
So we
city
do
of-
need the revenue sharing, and we need that.
Definitely.
To keep
Okay.
it out of smart scale.
To keep it out of smart scale.
And just to add as a point of note, those who are on the MPO would know that the Board of Supervisors has sent a letter as a body in support of the Zan Road project to the MPO. So we have weighed in that way on that project.
And I do think, Chip, maybe you could address this. My understanding is that VDOT is looking at how they could reduce the cost of that connection with a possible just tweak in the location, but that work is not completed yet.
Right, although probably since our last conversation, the county has received a development application for a commercial building that would be right in that
place.
footprint.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Which probably excludes
All right.
that from happening.
Well, that's good for me to know,
Yes.
because I knew that VDOT, the last I talked to Joel, he was looking.
They were looking at
it.
an alternate location that may have been more cost-effective,
Right.
but if a building got built there, then the acquisition costs go up.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it
it was.
pretty
loo-
much
It was
eliminates
looking
that.
at the area where there's already a stub out, and to be able to use that, utilize that. But so for what Chip is saying, that's not going to work.
Right.
Right,
Yes, ma'am.
okay,
So just so
at least for now.
clear on this, because I'm not on the MPO, the 18 million in revenue if sharing. So what would happen, for instance, is if it was 38 million, then we could put the whole 18 million to it. We'd have to come up with another 20 million.
Yes.
In order to do, in order to do that. There's no other revenue sharing from anywhere else. The 18 million would be the revenue sharing.
No, I think the revenue
no,
sharing
the
is
18
the
million,
leftover
the-
20 divided in half.
Yeah.
So
The-
half is revenue sharing of the 20, and the other 10 is the city-county partnership. The 18 is just down payment, left over from another funding bucket. That's my understanding.
Yeah, the 18 million is already allocated, and I think Chief was trying to scare me about last week when we were discussing this, that it's possible that if the money is not spent or committed next year or next 2 years, there might be a chance that we lose the $18 million.
That's a guarantee.
I was going to say, that's a
We've been
definite.
very straight about that.
That's a definite.
So the need to commit that fund to the project is very critical.
Yeah, we don't want to lose that money for our community, have that money go to another community, so.
But it has to go to that intersection in
Yes.
some way.
Yes,
Yes.
that's correct.
Well, one of the identified projects that were on the map.
You know, we had multiple projects that were included in that hydraulic work, so that's what they're talking about.
There are a
The
total
Sand
of,
Road Bridge was one of them, yeah.
there are a total of 8 projects in all.
So the ask is for us to agree to commit an additional $5 million each?
Yeah, for the Zen Street, Zen Road Bridge.
And I'm sorry. The MPO staff, as well as partnering with the city and the county, we're trying to work up some scenarios for you now, because the other thing that could bring the cost down a little bit is if it goes through Smart Scale, we're looking at FY $26, which is inflated for the cost of money between now and when the construction would take place. If it's a revenue sharing project, the construction could take place quicker and therefore cost less. So, we're having to try to figure that out so that we can get an accurate cost estimate.
So the short of it is, we are going to hear more from somebody.
You're
to
going to
help
hear
us
more,
Yes.
drive this
and we will
decision.
have
Okay.
you a dollar amount
Right.
to consider to
Donor
contribute.
project.
And if I may, Mr. Boyles and Alex and Chip, the way we were talking about it in the MPO, and Mike Signer and I in the MPO, and Ann and Ned are on the MPO, is that the D, which is the Zan Road project, which could shift over, that was the one component of this whole smart scale application that could be a standalone component. Everything else depends on 2 or 3 other investments, which makes it, you know, in the $50 to $60 million range. So that's just the reason, and the reason why that crossing is very important is because the hydraulic interchange with 29 is so deadly dangerous for pedestrians and cyclists, as well as cars. And this was an alternative route that we all thought, well, gee, we could get that alternative route across 29 that would be safer for all modes of transportation, and it could actually then facilitate redevelopment in the hydraulic small area planning area as well as in the Stonefield area. So it had an economic development aspect to it, as well as a connectivity aspect to it, and a public safety aspect to it.
In both jurisdictions.
In both
And I was going to
jurisdictions.
say, I was going
Both
to add to that,
jurisdictions.
that it is the project that involves both jurisdictions and is a win-win for both of our jurisdictions.
Yes.
Yes,
And-
which
and
is the beauty.
The concern with it in a smart scale application is it didn't score well when we applied before. And even with $18 million contributed towards the $38 million price, it probably will not score very well again, because while it does offer some benefit to the congestion at the intersection, it's not a lot. And so it would rank much better in a revenue sharing
Yeah.
than it would
Yeah.
a smart scale.
The timetable for that report back?
It will
Yep.
be by March to April when a letter of intent has to go into VDOT.
But as far as what you and your staff people are working on to come back to us, I
Yeah,
assume that will be
definitely.
November or
Yeah.
something.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Okay,
And
that's
that'll-
what I want to know.
And
Yes.
that goes to the MPO.
Yes, that would
Yes.
go to the
And
MPO,
the
but we
Supervisors.
will
And-
come
Right,
to you all, because that's where the fiscal impact.
that's right,
Mhm.
that's
And
right.
if I may ask a question, so you have a letter of
Intent.
intent and approval from the Albemarle County Board of
Of
Supervisors?
support.
of
It's a
support.
recommendation.
When
at the
do you
Zan
need
Road.
something like that from the city?
ASAP.
That was just extra. lagniappe, as we say in Louisiana. But that was just to show their support.
Oh, okay, so it wasn't necessary.
For that project. You aren't required to prioritize. It's your MPO members' vote on the MPO that gives that support.
Okay.
How you as MPO members get the support from your board is kind of up to you.
The letter was just an intent to show that we were supportive of that project.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have 5 other items on this information item. So next is the Sunset Bridge maintenance.
Yeah, I want to, that's going to come back later on in the joint CIP section, so we can move down to the housing voucher program.
Okay.
And that'll be Stacy Pethia. Maybe Mike Murphy.
I'm waiting for Dr. Patty. She's coming.
She was way back there.
Once upon a time, if Dr. Pethia and I were standing here, we would both be city people, but I won't talk about my feelings of loss. So, coming home. All right, so this has been orphaned, these 2 slides from the general affordable housing presentation. And part of the reason for that is just that in the history of collaboration between the city and county, you'll remember that one of the topics was, were there offices that could be combined, right? Way back, there was discussion between Delegate Toscano and councilors and board supervisors, and we talked about things like fire services, schools, social services, housing offices. So, needless to say, in the city, this is actually a program that gets administered by the Housing Authority, not technically under the local government control. You all administer that previously through a housing office, now through Department of Social Services staff. The big takeaway here is that rent is high here, and that while HUD and the feds think that we have over 500 vouchers available, we really only end up leasing up under 400 people per locality, and it ends up almost identical, really, who we're able to lease up for this program. One of the things we'll follow up on later is an innovation that the city has had funded now for 2 fiscal years and is programmed into the 5 years of our capital improvement program. And it's a supplemental rental assistance program. $900,000 each of the next 5 years. When it was originally envisioned, we thought it could allow us to provide some relief to people waiting for vouchers or people waiting on the public housing list, which is literally thousands of folks waiting for those 2 programs. So this is on our collaboration list when we get back to affordable housing. Just want to set the stage for that. Right now, I think we have about 89 people who are currently leased up. And with the funding that council has allocated, we believe that there is the opportunity to lease up about 110 families at a time with the investment from the council. So, as I said, we can revisit this when we'll stand up here again for you all, talk about affordable housing, but we can answer questions just about vouchers if you like.
I have a question. How does it get determined the number that get allocated to each area? Like we have 533, the county has 538. Our populations are obviously very different.
I honestly have that is set by Department of Housing and Urban Development, and I don't know how they determine how many vouchers each area gets, along with how much funding. So it's a weird situation. So you're allocated a number of vouchers. In this case, it's almost equal, and we probably are allocated about the same amount of funding. And so housing authorities or voucher program administrators need to either lease up all of their vouchers or use the majority of their funding. HUD sets it at some weird level. It comes out to be for about 533 vouchers. They see that the voucher assistance would be about $540 a month per household. And so in smaller areas with lower rents, they can actually use all those vouchers. In our area, both the city and the county are using approximately 96% of their budget authority.
The dollar voucher.
Right.
I have a question about the utilization rate. So I just want to make sure I understand. That means that only 3/4 of what's being allocated can be used because you can't find the units? What is the meaning of that?
No, as Dr. Guthrie was just saying, we spend 96% of the money.
That's what I heard.
And so that means that instead of averaging $540 per household that we're helping them with supplement of their rent or subsidy, we have to give much more than that. So what would have gone for $533 in a low rent community only goes for $398 here.
I get it.
Part of that is due to federal regulations require 75% of the individuals and households receiving voucher assistance to have incomes at or below 30% of area median income. So the more extremely low income households you have in the program, the higher the rental assistance payments would be. And HUD set that requirement because in the beginning, housing authorities were renting out all of their vouchers to higher income families who may not need as much assistance. So they switched the program regulations around to help folks that had the most need in our areas.
And it spends down the allotment faster.
Right.
Have our two localities ever looked at this issue as something that needs to be discussed with our representatives, our congressional, I don't know. Not in 12 years. So that's what Ann said.
I don't know.
And I'm just, maybe it it would be very difficult to get some action. Maybe there's not enough of a critical mass of communities. I don't know. I'm just asking.
All right, so there's a couple things. HUD each year sets fair market rents throughout all metropolitan areas. So that is a lot what drives the funding. And then it really depends upon how much is allocated to the overall voucher program at each year through the congressional actions. And they have tended to, they're not increasing as much as they need. So they are decreasing funding rapidly for public housing, but incrementally increasing money for the voucher programs. And I don't know, I think you would have to have, housing authorities are always talking to legislatures about how they need more money. So I'm not sure that would make a huge difference.
Okay, that's good.
When they do establish a fair market rate for an area, would that be for, how small is that area? Would we do the Thomas Jefferson Planning District
or just
area?
town, or
Or
just
it would include a fair market rate that would include Fluvanna and Nelson and the whole area?
Correct. The only one, Louisa County, they consider in a different metropolitan area, so Louisa County's not included, but Greene County, Albemarle, Charlottesville, Nelson County, those are all in there.
Has there been a federally combination of the funding buckets for a jurisdiction such as ours where, because what we were told 6 or 7 years ago at those meetings that Mike was referring to was that the county program was under a different category than the cities, and so we would not logistically be able to combine, but I don't know if that is still the case.
We're not technically under a different program. So the Office of Housing for the county, excuse me, is considered the public housing authority for the county. The difference between the Office of Housing and CRHA is that CRHA can provide public housing and we don't. So for the voucher program, we are considered the same.
Okay.
Ms. Malik, the other thing you want to remember from that time period is that it was staff's view that there would be a risk in going to the federal government and saying, hey, we want to combine these two entities and have a single entity. And so this number here that is now 1071 total, HUD might say, oh yeah, sure, you guys can combine, and now it's 800 or whatever the number may be. And so we were better off operating independently.
That makes sense.
One question, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a little hump from here to Petersburg. But in any event, one question that I have for, I think, both parties and as well as staff is when we have, like, obviously we're all trying to address these issues, and we have the Thomas Jefferson Housing Planning District and so forth. But I think on a much more smaller scale, just our own independent housing authority. So like the Charlottesville Housing Authority, the CRHA, all these acronyms, and then the Albemarle Housing Authority. Like, should we look at having just joint sessions between the two? Just on a very plain scale, let's have a joint session and hear from the specific housing authorities about what we're working on and what the other housing authority is working on. Because honestly, I don't think that you all are briefed on what our housing authority is working on and vice versa. And I think that could be a way in which we could kind of build some synergy in that regard.
So because the county does not have an official public housing authority like Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority, we don't actually have a board of commissioners. So it would really be the Board of Commissioners meeting with county staff, perhaps.
So what if we were creative with it? If we said a session, a joint, if we had a session with the CRHA and the council, which we do periodically, and we invited you all, and then everybody got an update. I know that sounds like another meeting, but again, it's just an alternative way for us to get around being in the loop. Because I think, the plans are great, and even the data, I think it's one thing for everyone to see it, but until you all actually hear from our Housing Authority Board about what's going on in the day-to-day and what we're working on or we're planning on, because Mr. Duffield isn't here. Like, I know Ms. Brenda Kelly is here and Mr. Murphy is well averse of what's going on, but we don't have any of the housing authority members, the board members here, or even any of our residents here to hear about like what they're seeing day to day. The silence means maybe that's a no.
Right, in our joint discussion, in just a few. As a thought.
Sure. I'm happy to talk as much about public housing redevelopment if that's what Dr. Bellamy is driving at. If you're talking about getting together, it might be more appropriate since the county staffs housing. Maybe they need a relationship with Mr. Duffield and his staff. And as many of the staffs do, social services collaborates and economic development and other folks. So that may be more of the solution than board to staff contact.
Well, yeah, I think that would be appropriate. I think, again, like us just kicking off those kind of alternative ways to have collaboration and communication, like staff to staff, like you alluded to, from our housing authority staff with the county staff, so that we both know what's going on. Because these numbers obviously they affect each other regardless of how many vouchers we have. The people go from line up, they go across the line and they don't even know if they're in the city or the county. So
Right now, we're developing a new housing director, a housing policy. And I think that certainly is something we can discuss when the board discusses the policy when Stacy brings back her next report. We do actually have a different set of problems too. We have the same problems we do, and then we have another set because we have a lot of rural poverty and a lot of rural housing issues. And that's what I would suggest is that this board discuss how we, the needs of how we interact with the city and your authority. Discuss our housing policy. We're at a little disadvantage because we don't have that worked out.
And in the staff report, it talked about the memorandum of agreement, which was the regional approach. So I don't know if the city folks are going to be thinking about that again. It says at the end that's not anticipated that they will rejoin. So I don't know if that's a hard stop on that whole element, in which case that's a different approach. I just don't know if we're going to talk about that later on today or some other time.
So that regional agreement was set up and designed to allow voucher families to move across jurisdictional lines without having to go through an extensive portability process. It's a time saver, and so if someone from receiving a voucher from CRHA moves into somewhere in the county, in the urban ring, the county just continue, they do all the approving, they just continue to administer that voucher and vice versa. And so that cuts down on a lot of the wait times and the problems getting people moved. The way it's supposed to work is that if someone from CRHA wanted to move to the county, then CRHA would have to send the paperwork over to the county. The county would then have to issue a voucher. There would have to be an agreement. Is the county going to absorb that voucher? In other words, take it into their program and make it one of their own? Or is the city going to pay, send the monthly rent payments, housing assistance payments to the county? So that agreement was just to make that all easier. The CRHA worked with a consultant last year who indicated to CRHA that that was against program regulations. He's right on one level, wasn't right on the other. So CRHA pulled back on that, pulled out of that agreement, and I'm not sure that I don't think there's any intention of going back in. Is there? Do you know?
That's not something we've discussed with Mr. Duffield recently, but we can certainly revisit that and report out to the council and the board. I can say that, you know, for most folks, if you look at one of the last points here on the city-funded supplemental rental assistance program, you'll see that folks look in the city, and they can't always find something in the city. In fact, about a third of the people end up in the county.
Thank you.
Moving on to the next item on the agenda is talk about the minority business support programs that we have, and Chris Single, our Economic Development Director, will make that presentation.
Good afternoon. At your last meeting, there was some interest in what the city and county are doing separately and collectively to support minority businesses. So we have two quick slides to update you on what's been happening. I'm joined here by Siri Russell, the new director of the Office of Equity Inclusion at the county. So one quick slide here just to update you on some city activities. We in July hired for the first time our first minority business development coordinator. So that person is focused pretty tightly on minority business support that we have been providing. And that person works in concert with a part of a position down in our procurement office that is focused on increasing supplier diversity. So those two positions are working in tandem under the direction of what's now the Minority Business Commission. It previously was a task force. It's now been converted to a commission. So that's a citizen group that provides some guidance to both of those activities. One of the key upcoming events is Minority Business Week, which is actually starting this Saturday and running through the following week. There are 6 events that are just moved into 1 week to really kind of highlight the minority businesses in the community and some of the support agencies that are supporting them. So we've got a flyer that looks a little like this. Some of you have probably seen it. It details all the events. Let me know if you're interested. You're welcome at any and all of them. Once again, that starts Saturday and then runs through the following Friday. One of the other highlights that has happened in recent months is the establishment of a business equity fund, which is a loan fund that is actually operated for us by CIC, the Community Investment Collaborative, and they're in the business of doing micro grants and training associated to that, microloans and training associated with that. So they are actually operating that fund for us. The council allocated $100,000 to be deployed in that fashion. So that is now up and running. 6 loans have been pushed out the door and payments are being received on the other end. Quick highlight on some of the city items, and the next slide has to do with city and county cooperation.
Right. So while the county is currently exploring how we might also support our small and minority-owned businesses through informational interviews with small and minority-owned county business owners, and also through multiple meetings with the city to learn a bit more about what they do, we're working really closely with the Economic Development Office for the city to sort of explore how we might expand our own support in the coming year. So there's not a lot to say about that, except that you'll be hearing more in the future.
Thank you.
questions?
Thank you.
Let's move on to equity collaboration. We do have Khaki Dimick here, and
She's in Africa.
well, I guess Mike Murphy
I'm here.
and Siri. Sorry.
No, I am not at all hurt to be called khaki. So, thanks, Mike. All right, so as you guys all know, both the city and the county right now, we're both on sort of independent, but I think parallel transformative journeys to begin to incorporate equity into our work more closely. While we're not in exactly the same place, we're definitely on the same road. And along those lines, we think there have already been and continue to be many opportunities for shared experience. One of those, right off the bat, being shared commitment. You know, the county has coming up on a year now that we've opened an Office of Equity and Inclusion. I know the city of Charlottesville is also discussing opening a similar office. We're already having a lot of shared conversations, really sort of participating in partnership and community conversations regarding equity. We've also, to that end, I think we'll talk about it a little bit more on the next slide, started sort of a shared conversation in the community breakfast series around equity. Shared ownership, as we explore this road that we're on together, we have, both the city and the county, been looking for opportunities to really partner around equity and around furthering that goal with some of our other partners like the TJPDC. We've also been sharing our knowledge, so this is still relatively new. I think it's probably known in this room, less than 1 in 10 local governments in the nation have offices of equity and inclusion. So the work that we do right here to share resources and connections and tools has been really important and impactful. And we look forward to a future state where perhaps we have shared priorities or even goals around equity regionally. So we've got opportunities for collaboration, a lot of these which I think we're already really moving on, one of which is coming up in October, where both the city and the county together will be talking about equity and the work that we've been doing locally at the Virginia Local Government Managers Association Conference for deputies, assistants, and others. We've also worked together on the Albemarle Charlottesville Community Remembrance Project, which I think we can all agree has been really successful here in the community. The county is currently developing an equity profile for Albemarle, and we really do see that as an opportunity, and we've talked about this with city leadership as potentially being an opportunity for partnership coming up here in the future. Also a lot of discussion back to that shared knowledge around joint training opportunities around equity and inclusion, regular communication with other organizations. I think something that the city has been really good about so far has been making sure that the county is at the table when there have been conversations around equity regionally. I've got more than one email or call from Khaki and Charlene about coming to another meeting. And then shared engagement with partners. So this has also been a really driving point because we recognize that equity is not something that either one of our localities does alone, that it's something that we do together. So we're really trying hard to live that. And then there's just a couple of pictures, actually. One from our Community Remembrance Project, which is an exciting day. And then these other 2 pictures are actually from that breakfast series that I mentioned, which the city has been a supportive partner in from the beginning. We've been doing that all year, where we host breakfast. The host site rotates, but it has participation from the city and the county, and also from UVA, both the school, all the different schools, and the health system, Martha Jefferson's health system, and many different nonprofit partners have also been participating. So this is an image from one that was hosted from Jefferson School African American Heritage Center. Y'all don't tell Andrea I blanked on that for a moment. Okay. Y'all have questions?
I have one question. I have one question in regards to equity partnerships, and I think it aligns with not just this slide, but even the previous slide in terms of the business. Similar to how as we're working together in terms of programming and figuring out how different ways we can work together. And I know Ms. Siri expressed that she's looking for different ways to partner, but like similar to how we have the Minority Business Week coming up, is this something that, because that revolves around equity in my opinion as well, is that something that we can look at, maybe the county participating in, sending out a blast email of sorts, letting county residents know that you want them to participate in Minority Business Week?
I mean,
I'd
that
like to
would
hear
be
more about it, yeah.
Easily incorporated.
Yeah.
That's it.
And that was actually part of the conversation that we had with Chris's office about, participating in that way.
And then you have ongoing communication with the county businesses as well to really learn directly from them what they need.
Right.
That's, but I think focusing on the opportunity for all is really what I hear the most from the residents in the district I represent for hiring and learning and access to programs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving along, we got Chris Jensen. I better look and see who's coming because some people aren't here. So Chris Jensen and Dan Mahone talk about Ravenna River Crossing.
Good evening, Chris Genzik with the City Parks Department, and this is Dan Mahan. One of the joint literal city-county bridges. Dan and I talk a lot about bridges. A lot of our work is on the city and county border, along our waterways, is a long-anticipated Ravenna River bicycle pedestrian bridge. This is being discussed in the Woolen Mills to Martha Jefferson Hospital area vaguely, and what the status of this is right now is that through the Planning District Commission and with VDOT, VDOT has the ability to use their own on-call consultants to move projects from the dream phase into the conceptual analysis of engineering to look at things like floodplains and connection points on either side and what sort of development's going on either side. So VDOT will be kicking off a study where city and county staff are going to be participating, but in this case it's actually VDOT doing the heavy lifting and paying their consultant to get it started, with the notion that we would know where in the area of Woolen Mills and to Market Street over to Pantops this bridge could realistically go, how long this bridge realistically will have to be, and what sort of constraints we have to work around in order to get the thing built. So this study will be going on for 9 months or so, I believe. The end result is we would know what kind of money we're looking at if we want to get the thing built and where we might get grant money to help fund this project. An estimate, the McIntyre Railroad Bridge was roughly $2.3 million total, so we guess this one's going to be probably about 3. It's a longer bridge, different constraints than a railroad, but it certainly has constraints involved. This map shows the general areas, so you can see where the Woolen Mills is in the south end there, and the old dam there at the island. That's I-64 on the south end, and Free Bridge on the north end. One thing to be clear about, this is just pedestrian bicycle at this time, and it is not directly associated with the Free Bridge study that was going on with vehicular traffic for the most part with the planning district. This would be good for transportation as well as recreation, as well as tourism. With the hospital having moved, a lot of people who maybe live in the city who commute to the hospital, this would certainly help them stay in their houses and get out to the hospital. And then this map just shows a few of the possible locations and some of the constraints that we're going to have to deal with as we narrow this down from there should be a bridge from here to there to exactly where this bridge ought to be, how high it needs to be. And particularly those floodplain rules are going to come into effect. The good news is the county has acquired some land on the county side of the river recently that makes this a lot more realistic of a project in terms of land and where it might land, literally. So I would imagine you would see a report result in about a year and maybe some thoughts about where funding would come from to move into construction phase.
I do have a question to that last point, and thank you. This is really wonderful to see, even to get to this point. So with regards to the potential businesses that would benefit from this, is there any plan to start convening them to the table and talking about it? Like State Farm, the hospital, and Willow Tree, you've mentioned all of them, but funding this thing to actually get it built will be another story.
Certainly, I think some are vaguely aware of it, but we should engage them more directly as this turns into an actual study.
Just mentioned that Martha Jefferson and State Farm, the businesses, have been working with us on the corridor itself prior to thinking about the bridge. So there is interest and support with this. I think that with Willow Tree and Woolen Mills and the development on the other side, we have a real rich opportunity to have something happen here. And as well as the connection along Moores Creek to the Southern Urban Connector, which ultimately will run all the way over to UVA. And that'd be it.
Dan and Chris, when you bring this back to the board and the city council, I would just ask you to also put in, please, a 100, besides the 100-year floodplain, a 500-year floodplain and a 1,000-year floodplain, given the precipitation last summer into fall with 2 500-year flood events, one after the other in the Ravenna River. I think it will be important for us to have an indication of what both of those floodplains look at when we get into doing more planning in this area.
Certainly, and this gets to the, we know it's going to be as high as Free Bridge, and some people think it's just a bike ped bridge. It has to be at least as high as Free Bridge, and that's why these things can get a little pricey, but they're, it's a much needed connection.
That's a really good point, though.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Moving on to our signalization coordination is Alex Ekafuna.
This project is designed to coordinate synchronization of all the signals on 29. As some of you may know, once you get to hydraulic and you get into the county, the signals tend to synchronize as you drive in that direction. So the city is working with VDOT to improve the signalization of street traffic lights between Emmett, between Ivy and hydraulic. At this point in time, we are finalizing the plan, the signal plans, so that we'll be able to build the project out. And we are looking at right-of-way acquisition sometime next year, and then subsequent after that, construction begins, and we expect to complete the construction in 2021. And one of the things that's going to happen once that project is completed is the city will have an agreement with VDOT, so that VDOT will take over the management and the maintenance of the traffic light. So after this is done, we'll transfer that to the VDOT. VDOT will take over the maintenance and management of this particular project once it's done. Do you have any other question?
I do. I have a question. This is music to my ears because, of course, at least a part of my district is, is affected by this. I do question, though, what you're talking about here, Alex, is along 29.
Mm-hmm.
One of the problems that the city and the county have together at our shared intersection, if you think about Preston, Barracks Road, and Emmett Street, as you go up by the north wing of Barracks Road Shopping Center, the lights that go all, you have, 2 stoplights that you have to go through before you get to the 250 bypass.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any thought about connecting those lights? Because VDOT controls and has put in much better signals on Barracks as you get into the county.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens with traffic now is that if you solve the problem at Emmett and, what am I trying to say here? Emmett and Preston, what we're doing is we're just pushing more congestion because it's not flowing well past the shopping center up towards the 250 bypass, which is really where a lot of people are trying to get to, the exits. So is there a way that you could look at those lights as well? I'm just suggesting that to look at that whole area in totality and not just concentrate on that one intersection would really be wonderful.
Yeah, definitely. I think that would be also evaluated, because VDOT is trying to make sure that there is a synchronized traffic light from the city into the county.
Yeah.
So that certainly would be evaluated.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other question?
Let's move forward to the bike and pedestrian connectivity.
This is the CIP slide. Should I go through these two, or is Brennan here? Alex, are you doing this one?
Essentially, these are some of the CIPs in terms of bike and ped capital improvement, the projects that have been planned and funded. Those are the list of projects that the city have planned and funded at this point.
We'll see if the Moores Creek piece, here we go. Continuing on what Alex was talking about, a specific area, the southern urban area, we have a lot of joint city-county activity going on in that area. The city owns a lot of parkland on the north side of the interstate, and there is a lot of both Region 10 county office building, commercial activity, and residential development on the south side of the interstate. So we've been working together to consider how we can complete the sidewalk network through that interstate exchange. Interstates are always not fun places to be if you're walking or riding a bicycle. So this is a multi-piece project that includes not only the on-road pedestrian pieces at Old Lynchburg Road to include a crosswalk and sidewalks, but also a greenway trail that would connect from Azalea Park back over to the Sunset Avenue Bridge near Eagles Landing, Jefferson Ridge, as well as study of the Sunset Bridge itself to see what can be done there to either rehabilitate that or potentially reconstruct it as a bike ped bridge. This map shows the area in question where the three different projects all connect into one bicycle pedestrian network. This is a very high priority in the city and county to connect these areas, and the county is proposing to submit a revenue sharing grant, VDOT revenue sharing grant in the 2019 cycle to fund these things. There have been 3 separate but all connected conceptual studies that have engineering review, cost estimates for these sorts of things so that we know what sort of money we're looking at, and we may consider a joint application as well as looking at an agreement as to who will take over maintenance and ownership of these facilities. And I think we have a double slide. Okay, so here we go. Those are some of the cost estimates as we know them today. David's here if you had questions about the revenue share agreement or revenue share application that they would be putting in. And there was a specific question earlier about the Sunset Bridge itself. This is Sunset Avenue Bridge. To go into that topic in quick detail, the city closed a portion of Sunset Avenue in the 90s with the number of development units coming in and the size of Sunset Avenue. I think they decided that could not handle that sort of traffic. So the city closed its road. The bridge over the creek is still part of the VDOT secondary road system maintained by VDOT, but there was an assumption that it had been closed as well. So when the floods came, the 500-year floods that we had 2 of in a row, the bridge got knocked around quite a bit and nobody quite knew who was supposed to fix it. So VDOT has come in and done some repair work to it. As part of these studies, we've had Line and Grade take a look at the bridge. They think it could probably be rehabbed and left in place without having to build a whole new expensive bridge. That would also go into this consideration as to who mows the greenway, who maintains the bridge, those sorts of things once these facilities are constructed. So David, did you have any additional items to note on this? Thank you.
I'm sorry, one more back. I wanted to see those
And some of those are local shares. The revenue sharing is 50/50, correct? I'm used to transportation alternatives.
It's a small bridge.
Revenue sharing is a 50/50 match, so the county has, Board of Supervisors has passed a resolution of intent to fund that full local match at this point in time so we can get the application in. And then we'll work with the city as to further agreements to share that cost.
And
Get your attention when it says a bridge at 20,000.
Yeah.
And I just want to
It's not in
say,
Brooklyn.
I do want to say a couple of things about that, and I'm hoping the city will help us with this one. That section, I think you all know this because I keep harping on it, but we have several affordable housing areas right on Old Lynchburg Road as it goes into the city. I know the city has a lot of traffic issues going in there. I've got, single moms in Timberlake Apartments, which is a low income, saying to me, I'm afraid to take a left-hand turn out of there in anything but a car to go to work. And most of the people that I talk to over there work in the city. And so they're trying to get to the city in their jobs, and it's just completely unsafe. And they're really looking forward, the people I speak with are really looking forward to a way to walk or bike. And some people are very interested in getting electric bikes. We'll have to talk about that at some point. But to try to get to work in the city and see this as a really safe way to get out of their cars, which a lot of them are having trouble affording, as we all know. So just to mention how important this one really is.
Thank you.
So I do want to have some clarity though on, is there an action item that's being requested then? That, because I see in this one slide that it says the city and the county may consider a joint agreement. Is that something that will come back to these joint boards and council later on?
I think that's an issue that the staff is talking about at multiple levels as to
Okay, so
how that's going to come back, and I would imagine that will come back to the boards and the council with the staff recommendation at some point.
All right.
We
And then the costs of all these pieces relative to what Liz is saying could also be fleshed out? So in the event of any kind of shared investment on the part of the city and the county?
Yeah, that's right. The county is fully committed to building the sidewalks on Old Lynchburg Road. We're hoping for some participation in the whole project with the city so that we can kind of effectively move forward and particularly figure out the long-term maintenance of the project, and that will probably require some memorandum of agreement.
Okay, and you'll be preparing those kinds of documents for us?
That's correct.
Thank you.
And we wanted to get that revenue sharing application in.
I understand. That's good. That's good. Thank you.
Sorry, I just realized that you all did not have the decks. So there was right. Because like earlier when you said like we didn't see that slide, I was like, wait, we have them in front of us. But now I'm realizing. So apologies. There was an extra set of things that didn't get distributed.
I kept trying to figure out
What I'm looking at.
Yeah.
They're coming down to it.
Sorry about that.
I think we have this one. We have this one. The ones on the bottom. She was handing all of them.
That's correct. Thank you.
All right. Well, moving on to our last section, we're a little bit behind time. Next folks I'm gonna bring up is Mike Murphy and Dr. Pethia to talk about affordable housing.
We're back. All right. So we've got, first slide here is to represent the funding for the year that we're in from the city and the county. Those investments come through a variety of different funding streams. I do have to ask Dr. Pethia to explain this bit about the affordable units to date. So that is a representation of since we started the Affordable Housing Fund in the city. That's what our 2196 is. But you could talk about how the 4,200 happened through proffered units.
So the county has legislative authority for essentially inclusionary zoning. So any residential or mixed-use development with a residential component that is approved for a rezoning or a special use permit must include 15% of the units, residential units as affordable housing. So this represents the number of units, proffered units that have actually been completed. I'm a bit confused, as I'll be honest, I'm confused as to why we have inclusionary zoning, but we do it through proffers, but I'm still learning that one. But the 4,200 units includes those proffered units that have actually been built and occupied by income qualifying families.
Since, yeah, I'm sorry.
They're all throughout the county.
Is this since the beginning of time? Like, what's the?
I don't know when they started counting those units. I just got the full count.
And this would, because a lot of the time it's for a period of time and then it ends after 10 years or 5 years or whatever. So this is not. These are not all currently online as affordable.
Yes, these are all actually currently online as affordable.
And at what AMI?
Up to 80% or below, just like the city. I don't know what the breakdown is. Okay. It also includes low-income housing tax credit units, and I believe that's everything it includes.
Seems really high.
So for what duration are they affordable?
So the rental units that are proffered are affordable for 10 years. The low-income housing tax credit units are affordable for 30 years. And the home ownership units are affordable for the first home buyer, just like a lot of other programs.
So these are not in the pipeline, these are actually existing?
Correct, correct. There's a lot more in the pipeline. Yeah, a ton in the pipeline.
That's a busy slide right there. This is a funding summary of the city's investments in our capital improvement program and in the general operating budget. The first column talks about just the year that we're in, and then the second column talks about what we projected out in the 5-year plan for the CIP. Obviously, the items that are to be determined are items that either happen as a part of the council budget decision each April or as a part of the agency budget review team or Vibrant Communities Fund.
And so this is a summary of the county's money for affordable housing. Most of this has been, well, the housing fund is money that comes through the housing proffers. Instead of providing units, they provide funding for that. That feeds into that, as well as some allocations through the budget process. Most of the other projects that have been funded, some of that is through the budget process and again the agency review process. And we do want to note that there has been an additional excuse me, $3.2 million that has been awarded to the Southwood Mobile Home Park redevelopment. We did not include it in that list because that's going to be dispersed over a period of time. So that is an additional $3.2 million.
What is the federal housing assistance fund? What is that getting at?
That is how much money goes in that we have been awarded through
It's
HUD.
not county money, it's federal.
That
money.
is correct. It's federal money, but it goes into.
Do we have something like that?
You will.
We do, but it's not in the city budget.
Right. That's what I'm
It's
trying to
a
understand, the
CRHA.
apples to apples.
And so these are some of the areas that Mike Murphy and I talked about we could possibly coordinate on and work jointly. That includes the Charlottesville Supplemental Rental Assistance Program and expanding that to include funding through the county as well as helping county recipients. A regional housing choice voucher program, as Mike explained earlier, that's a tricky business. Both contributing to a permanent supportive housing process, projects such as the crossings. There is talk about building a crossings 2. Jointly funded evaluation of nonprofit housing providers, a joint land bank or property acquisition fund, or a joint affordable housing fund.
I just wanted to touch on briefly about the potential crossings 2, which we've been working directly on. Effectively, the goal with the crossings 2 is to build off of the crossings 1, which is across the street from the McDonald's. But we're looking at essentially ending chronic homelessness. With this structure, it's a potential 80 to 90 unit structure supported by Virginia Supportive Housing. 40 to 50 of the units will be for the chronically homeless, which according to the list, the supportive chronic homeless list that we have for both the city and the county right now is at 43 persons. So if we can build this structure, not only will it effectively end chronic homelessness, but also will provide affordable housing units for individuals at the 30% or even lower AMI. So we're really hoping that, as we continue to work out details and this comes forth before both bodies, that there can be some support, because it really will be good for both entities.
Sounds good.
I do have a question. Is the county at all aware of the city's discussions about the form-based code with the height bonus and the synthetic tax increment finance district as a way to raise revenue for the Charlottesville Affordable Housing Fund? And I'm just saying that because if not, then that might be another example of the need to have our planning departments and our budgetary people talk. Because you're also talking about form-based codes in your RIO small area plan. So I just wondered if any of this is happening, or is it just happening in parallel?
I know the planners working on the county's form-based code is keeping track of what's the discussions in the city. So,
but I mean, it's directly related to affordable housing strategies and also raising revenue. So I just think that would be a good idea if anyone else agrees.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks.
We would like to hear about that.
Yeah.
Sounds like Stacy says that there
And
is
by
communication, right?
The same
That
token.
Yes, I
Yeah,
believe there's some communication, but I do know, because you recently had an open house or community talk about that. And I know the planners that are working on the form-based code were at least tuned in. I don't know if they were actually able to get there, but they kept track.
I didn't see any county planners, and I'm sure that I've been trying to tune in on all your efforts with your codes, and I haven't been really kept abreast of it either. So I think both bodies would do well to understand what each other's doing. And it was a goal that was stated in 2012 that we would be doing land use and infrastructure planning together. It was actually integrated in our latest comp plan. So I just underscore that because this is something that's been an aspiration for a long time between our two bodies.
They're nodding their heads, so as we continue to discuss.
Yeah, oh
form-based
yeah,
code,
yeah.
we'll-
And I did send everybody around the document
Yeah,
from
that's right.
2012.
And I have it here, Kathy.
Yeah,
I printed it
yeah.
out. I don't know if everybody, because it came in kind of late.
Oh yeah, I just found it.
I did print it out, so everybody has that on their email.
Great. So I wanted to know if the city has found some solutions for any of these programs, but also the first one, the first bullet, what my mostly rural and low income and elderly folks worry about is an increase in tax rate that will drive them out of their house in order to provide supplemental housing for others. So have you found some other solutions of funding for these kinds of programs that you're putting many, many zeros into to help with your urban residents? Because we're trying to as I said, a laudable goal, but the burden is carried often by very, very low income people who are retired or very elderly and have no resilience whatever to deal with the increased costs for a tax rate type of thing.
So, to be clear, the Supplemental Rental Assistance Program is our locally funded replication of an HCV voucher. I think what you're talking about is something that the mayor really advocated for in this last budget process, and we put a lot of additional dollars behind in the CHAP program, which, that's not the way I want to go. You'll see that we have some housing affordability tax grants here and rent tax relief for elderly and disabled. So we've got about $2 million in the type of relief that will keep people in those homes. Is that what you're asking?
But those dollars as revenue to you are coming as taxes from your residents. And so there's that fine line of, are we maintaining the affordability of the people who are here now as well as helping others? And I agree that it's a monstrous issue. I just don't know how to fix it.
So what is the question? Because this is geared to help our lowest income.
To keep them from having tax increases is what you're saying, because that's, I mean, if you're raising 2 cents on the tax rate to generate cash to provide the programs, they're paying more to stay in their existing house.
So in our, under CHAP, if someone, let's say their income is under $25,000 a year, they don't pay taxes. At this point, our grant covers it at 100%. Right. And then up to $35,000, they get $1,000 in tax relief, and $45,000 is $750, and then it's $500 up to $55,000 in grant.
Okay. So I'm wondering, the state tells us how much tax relief we can give our citizens. Is this a situation where city and county have a different ability to do this, lawyer?
I'll give you the vague
Tax relief, but we're capped.
I'll need to look at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think the question came up at a board meeting about 3 months ago, and I think the answer was we're doing as much as we can.
Yeah, we're capped.
That's what we're keep being told,
Yeah.
is that we're capped. We've been asking this, quite frankly, for years.
we
How
have.
can we deal with this? And our lawyer keeps telling us that we're capped. So it will be interesting. We'll have to find
Yeah.
out if that's a legislative issue that's a difference between city and county. But thank you for bringing that up, because
Yeah.
it's a good question for us to understand.
I would just add, there is a specific provision in the City of Charlottesville Charter that does offer, I think, more authority for the city than the county.
Yeah.
in a
Okay.
sense.
Yeah.
So see that it's one of those issues that we have a big difference.
Mr. Boyles?
We need to take some of this on with the jobs.
Chip Bullock's going to come up and do the regional transit partnership. But before Chip, before you get started, I also like to introduce our new CAT director, Mr. Garland Williams.
Oh,
Thank you, Dr. Richardson. Members of council, members of the Board of Supervisors, I just want to reiterate, happy to be here. Looking forward to having individual meetings with all of you so we can get to understand your goals and objectives for CAT. Looking forward to improving our ridership. I think we are sitting on top of a gym. We just need to shine it up a little bit and make it work a little bit better. So I look forward to working with each of you, getting to know you, getting to know your goals so we can actually improve the system. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for allowing me to bring you up to speed on the Regional Transit Partnership. As many of you know, The City Council and Board of Supervisors created the partnership about 2 years ago, and in that memorandum of understanding set the mission for the partnership to provide recommendations to decision makers on transit-related matters. Since that time, the partnership itself has gone through a strategic planning process and created the vision that you see there before you. I won't read all of it, but it is to create an efficient, high-quality, integrated regional network of transit services. The RTP's first meeting was October 20. Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Okay, it's just a different format. Was October of 2017. The strategic plan, working with SIR consultants out of Richmond, a gentleman named John Martin, who has worked with many of you in the room, established the strategic plan in August of 2018. The Albemarle County and City of Charlottesville entered into a funding MOU, which was the first written MOU for funding services since the two have been partnering by unanimous votes on both entities. We're very, very proud of that accomplishment. And then both entities agreed in the FY20 budget to begin to fund some additional work by the partnership, creating some training activities and also some other educational types of and administrative functions. And then most recently, which probably some of you haven't quite heard, is that we anticipate UVA to become a voting member in October of 2019, next month. So very,
Really good.
some very big accomplishments. Some of the engagements that have taken place has been the strategic planning session. We've had 2 different educational opportunities with Jarrett Walker Associates, probably one of the largest transit planning agencies in the nation. And then coming up later this month, I believe it's on the 26th, the partnership is partnering with the Chamber of Commerce to sponsor a listening tour with chamber businesses and other area businesses to hear specifically what are the opportunities and needs for the business community in providing public transit. Some of the current strategies that we're working on right now is we're partnering with Virginia's Department of Rail and Public Transportation for a joint regional strategic plan. In the past, both CAT and JAUNT have been required every 5 years to conduct a transit development plan, which talks about current and past activities in planning for the future. The state now requires CAT alone, along with other public transit agencies like CAT, to conduct a transit strategies plan. JAUNT is not required to do that, and the University Transit System, the other partner to our partnership, they're self-funded. They aren't required to do any of that. But we're, oops. Oh. Nope, I think we're still there. Just.
I think it's one back.
Anyway, I'll keep talking through it. Stop me anywhere. And so what the partnership is proposing to the City Council and Board of Supervisors is to conduct a regional transit strategies plan that would include JAUNT, Charlottesville Area Transit, and the University Transit System, and do not only a current conditions, but looking at future conditions, and not just looking at existing ridership, but looking at potential ridership, interviewing people of why they don't ride the system right now, as well as the people who do ride the system. The state helps to fund the required amount, but to do a regional plan, it would require additional local funds to include both UTS and JAUNT. We're working with DRPT right now to estimate what that amount would be, but just to give you an idea, a study like this in total is probably about $600,000 or $700,000. Takes a year to complete. So when we get those estimates, we'll come back to you, but DRPT will fund the lion's share of this. It's just a match amount that we would be looking to do. Some of the other activities is and coming out of the strategic plan, is to create a unified marketing system. Though one of the long-term goals is to consider a regional transit authority, as an interim step is to begin to market all of our systems, CAT, JAUNT, UTS, the rideshare program, the connectivity with some of the state. The state is currently accepting RFPs from bus providers to create a system from Danville, Virginia to Washington, D.C. that would stop in Charlottesville, to market all of those under one heading, one title, and create a website and information system so that potential riders could go to one place and find out even how to go from a ride share, a bicycle path, to use it on a bus, to catch a train, to come back, would be just one-stop shopping. Finally, one of the other things that most recently came up at the partnership and a technical committee is currently looking at for FY21 the operating budgets of both CAT and JAUNT, and to include driver compensation, recruitment, and appreciation, making sure that all of the systems are working collectively and together with their driver compensation. With that, I can answer any questions.
And Chip, and the reason why the last item came up was because we were hearing that it was really very challenging to recruit drivers from both CAT and JAUNT. Am I right?
And to include
the schools.
And
the
to
school
include the
systems.
school systems, yes.
Because people need to remember, Kathy,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
at the table for this partnership, we have both school
That's true.
division,
Yes.
transit systems. They're part of our transit work in the community, our ridership, yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I guess we should just do a time check. We have 3 items left, and it's 6.
I apologize. I have to go right now to get to another meeting in Crozet, so I'm sorry to be leaving you.
Is
So
everyone
d-
else comfortable with adding 15 minutes?
And I think
I
that's,
am, sure.
I think that's all we need, about 15
Yeah,
minutes.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Okay.
Ned, you guys okay down there? 15? Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Next item is climate action. We have Crystal Rittervold, Susan Elliott, and Lance Stewart.
Since it's 6 o'clock, we'll take about 30 seconds to get through this.
Appreciate it.
You know I can talk fast. I appreciate you giving us a chance to give a quick update on climate action together work. And I use that term because 2019 really has been the year in which the city and the county, and I would add in UVA, are all positioned and involved with various activities, actions, and commitment that are related to climate protection, and that includes greenhouse gas reduction setting greenhouse gas reduction goals, doing climate action planning, not necessarily a joint climate action plan, but in collaboration and alongside each other, and then ultimately the implementation of those climate action plans is going to be the big deal. Planning and we're working together on those planning and implementation efforts. We'll be looking to explore. What's that?
Move the slide one.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. We're exploring strategies with regional benefits, so really looking at what comes out of those climate action plans that we can do together and that are going to be more effective if we work collaboratively. Some of that builds on things we've done now, like working with a nonprofit partner, LEAP, to align the types of services that are being offered. Considering financing or funding mechanisms or tools that will work for people who work in the city and the county together. Thinking about opportunities with waste management or landfill diversion that makes sense across the jurisdictions. And then we have a lot of joint outreach and events. Even as recently as Sunday, there was an activity at the Paramount, and there's a website called Climate Action Together in which that message is being shared. A quick update. It's not on the slide, but probably the biggest update is that City Council did adopt an updated emissions reduction goal this summer, and that is 45% reduction by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2050. And that's from a 2011 baseline. And this is going to be, these are the kind of goals which we know the county is considering similar goals. A lot of other communities around the state are considering similar. But the directives that came from council about moving forward were to front end our reductions, so not wait until it's 2049 to figure out how to do carbon neutrality, but to start a process that gets us towards these significant reductions. We're about a 21% reduction now, so we have about 24% left. We have a directive that our climate action plan address equity along with financing and funding strategies for the private sector. And we have a directive to work in conjunction with regional partners to implement seamless programs and services that make it easier for our citizens to participate and access the tools and resources that we put together. So I'll turn it over to Lance.
Good evening. I don't talk as fast as Crystal, but I'm more concise.
You make up for it.
Funnier, too. Update for us now. We'll be coming to our Board of Supervisors just next week. We'll be talking about our efforts since our last update in the spring. That's included a host of outreach efforts in collaboration with Charlottesville. Also, we've had Climate Mondays meetings that started at the first part of May and went all the way through June. Every Monday night we had public meetings. We had 5 sector work teams with cross collaboration between the city, county, UVA, TJPDC, members of the public, more than 50 people all told working on recommendations and listening opportunities. So we're going to be summarizing in a broad sense the recommendations of those work teams as we move into drafting the climate action plan this coming week. We've talked, and our stated intention has been to adopt ultimately the same goal that Charlottesville just adopted. We'll be talking this Wednesday about the timing of doing that and making a recommendation that we formally adopt those goals sooner rather than later, so that we have some additional clarity as we draft the climate action plan itself. And also asking that we rejoin an organization called ICLEI. And that kind of goes to the next slide here, really. Using common greenhouse gas inventory reporting. That's the tool Charlottesville has used. It is a tool that Albemarle did use and was directed by the board approximately 9 years ago to not be a member of that anymore. We're asking that we can be a member again so that we are on the same page when we're looking at our inventories from year to year. We know that we've got the same set of assumptions that we're working from that tool provides us. We hope that once we have that common tool, that in the future we'll actually coordinate our requests to utilities to get the data that we need to update that report. It's very time intensive, and combining our efforts on that could save time, certainly staff time, but overall time as well. We also want to coordinate on outreach, education globally, very similar to what Mr. Boyles was talking about a few minutes ago between the city and the county and UVA, and having a single brand or branding approach for these opportunities that we both can benefit from. We think it can make sense for the community to hear one message that we're all saying going forward. So we're really excited about having more conversations about that moving forward. Again, we both are very interested in talking, including equity in our discussions about investments and programs. Typically many programs are geared towards people with elective income to make investments in their homes or their businesses. Not all people have the choice to do that. They don't have extra income to save energy on. So we want to be sure that we meet the needs of that constituency and that emissions sector group, and achieve housing affordability goals as we do this work. And generally, and also to that end, as we look at all opportunities, that we assess the co-benefits of the opportunities, and whether that is from housing affordability standpoint or economic development. There are many ways that there can be co-benefits to programs. And we want to make sure that we look at elements other than strictly greenhouse gas reductions in terms of achieving our community's goals.
Could I just make a suggestion? I think it would behoove both of our localities to make sure, as we're doing this work, that at least at some level we pull in both of our school divisions and the leadership in those schools, because there's not a better place to reach a good portion of our communities than families with children in schools, number one. And they also do operate large transit systems. And so if we can pull them in with our work so they understand what we're doing and we're not operating separately, I just think it would really be, and maybe we're doing that, but
Yeah,
I think there's a need to increase that partnership and that awareness.
Absolutely. I think it's important to keep in mind that when we look at what we call the government carbon footprint, it's usually in the 3, 4, or 5% of the overall,
Yes.
and that's why so many of the actions and initiatives and strategies that we pursue need to engage the rest of the community.
Yes.
And it's and sort of the last bullet I would translate, it also means that we can't just do climate action as an aside. It needs to be integrated in everything we do, because we will never reach these goals of 45% and carbon neutrality if we aren't talking about the impacts of housing, land use, transportation, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's an update, but it's also a plea that as we move forward, that we don't just talk about this topic when there's a little bit of extra time, or we're never going to make it. And the community expects us to make it.
Well, I'd just like you to engage the two school divisions as much as possible. Albemarle County Public Schools drive, I think it's 13,000 miles a day. That's a big impact.
And
So,
I
on a
will
carbon
say
footprint,
that
yeah.
we've had great participation
Yeah.
from Albemarle County Schools.
Yeah.
We have a member of their executive team on our steering team. On our coordination team, we've had Jim Foley, who's the head of the school bus system, fleet manager generally for the county as well as a representative from the buildings. What we have not done yet is directly interface with the school board of supervisors or the long-range planning committee,
Yeah.
which I'd like to do.
Yeah, and that's great.
And along those lines, City School Board adopted a resolution on energy and water performance. So I think that's in line with these commitments that are coming up.
And
Just a quick question. Do you have any information about this initiative that Dominion Energy is funding electric buses for school divisions?
We are scrambling to coordinate on pursuing that and
Because
seeing
it
what the
also they need
opportunities
the
are.
infrastructure for the charging stations and all that.
And that's where we're welcoming our new transit director, because talking about what Dominion wants to do in the Central Virginia area, we can all get our heads together.
Great.
And just a quick mention, we're going to talk about composting for just a moment afterwards, but when you're talking about schools and, you know, their food program is significant, and given that estimates are 30% of our waste is food waste, when we talk about landfill diversion, that's where we need to be going. So, anyway.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And the last item up for discussion is composting, Mr. Bill Moyer, and he'll give a brief report.
And brief it will be. So the Ravenna Authorities provides composting services of organic waste to the community at 3 locations. Yes. The first is at our McIntyre Recycling Center on McIntyre Road, where we collect about 50 tons per year of compostable food waste in the green containers you can see in the lower picture. And we have a contractor that carries those away to a compost facility in Waverly, Virginia. It costs us about $12,000 a year for that service, of which the city pays 30% and the county funds 70% of that cost in accordance with our recycling agreement. Just to give you a little clue, Waverly is south of Richmond near Petersburg. So it is quite a drive to get it down there, but that's where it goes, to the McGill composting facility. I was thinking.
You're going to need a big truck.
The second location is out at Ivy, at our new center there. We actually have an ad hoc convenience center until we get a new one built. But we have one or two of these yellow containers that we use to collect compostable food waste from residents at no cost. Businesses can bring it there for $178 a ton. But the big user of this actually is the University of Virginia. They have a contractor, and we have the same contractor, Black Bear Composting. So Black Bear collects about 500 tons per year from UVA. They bring them to Ivy, where we weigh it. We charge Black Bear a fee for that, and then we pay them to take it away, to take it to Cremora, where they have a compost facility. So Cremora is over in the valley, not quite as far as Waverly, about 28 miles. Thirdly, we compost our biosolids, wastewater biosolids that come from our wastewater treatment plant. And so in our what we call our solids handling building, you can see that comes off a conveyor chute right down into a truck. These are the organics that are at the end of the wastewater treatment process. And this would be a trailer full of those products. We send 10 or 11 of those trailers every week to the Waverly Compost Facility, the same place we send the food products from McIntyre. This is a little bit more expensive. We have 14,000 tons per year, and it costs about $600,000 a year to ship the biosolids to Waverly, where they make compost. The city and the county share that cost, currently about 50% each. And so this is a picture of the big trucks dumping the biosolids in the facility at Waverly. We do have a master plan under consideration where we're taking a new look at composting and how we might improve those services for the area, and we expect to make a presentation to our Vanna board later this month on that topic.
And that would, just one statement, that's considering putting that composting facility at Ivy, at
Yes,
the
ma'am.
MUC.
And I'd just like to point out that I'm glad you showed where all those other locations were, because it's kind of counteracting our goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to the transportation sector by driving all the way to these different remote locations. So
absolutely.
Yeah, that's part of what our study's taking a look at, how we can optimize this whole program.
And I do want to thank you for taking care of the oyster shells.
That's our newest program in
Great to
McIntyre,
know
where we
about.
collect oyster shells.
They're going to be at McIntyre.
Which then gets shipped back to Richmond, who reseed them through VCU, and they put the reseeded shells back in the river. So, very good. Thank you.
Hey, Bill, would you kindly tell us when things get deposited, biosolids, et cetera, in Waverly, who operates that facility and what they use all that biosolid material for
The
specifically?
company is called McGill. That's the company name, and they make compost and they sell it.
So it's commercially available compost?
Yes, sir.
Thank
And
you.
so they mix their biosolids, they mix food waste, and they make compost, and then they sell it.
That's good.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
It's heat treated.
All right.
Yeah.
Not bad.
Before you close, I'd just like to say thank you, Jeff, and thank you, all the county folks, and also the city folks for putting this all together. And I just want to give a special thanks to Emily Kilroy for assisting me in my first joint meeting on the city side.
This was an excellent meeting.
Tron, thank you so much. And Emily did step out to.
she's right back there.
Did she go?
She's back there. There we go.
Madam Mayor and Mr. Chairman, this concludes our fourth joint meeting with both boards and staff for afternoon work sessions within the last 12 months. Today, the 135 minutes that we've spent together has reflected 25 speakers, a number of topics, And as our next steps, I will be asking our staff, along with the city staff, to coordinate today's minutes and to put together action minutes of the things that we're going to need to be following up on over the next several months. There's been specific direction given by both the Board of Supervisors and the City Council on a number of topics. So the staffs will leave today, and over the next week to 2 week period, we will be collecting our action items. We will be putting that back together, and I would suggest, Dr. Richardson, that we co-author a memorandum that would go to both the City Council and the Board that outlines the action follow-up items due to the number of discussion topics that we had today. I do want to formally thank Dr. Richardson and his staff for hosting us today, and I would also like to thank the county staff for working very hard. Several months ago, whenever Dr. Richardson and I met for dinner, we talked about what we hoped, what we believe success looked like for today. And one of the things that we talked about was trying very hard to make sure that our boards knew that the staffs are trying diligently to communicate intentionally and work hard collaboratively on things that make sense. So I hope both boards have seen that today, that there is a significant amount of intentionality in the staffs working back and forth together on a regular basis. I think over the last year, I feel personally that the 4 meetings that we have created momentum. I think that the boards, I hope, will be impressed with the memorandum that we co-author and send out as to all of the things that we'll be following up on. Mr. Chair and Madam Mayor, I would suggest that conclude this meeting. There will be both boards will be going through elections over the next 90 days. And I think that when you get these memorandums, you will see that there's a lot of work to do. And my suggestion would be that Dr. Richardson and I, once the new boards are seated, would get back together in January and talk about what makes sense as our next meeting that the two boards would get together in probably early 2020. Mr. Chair, I'll ask you and I'll ask Madam Mayor if that meets your expectations at this time.
Does mine.
Unless there are comments from individual board members from either the council or the Board of Supervisors, we're prepared to turn it back over and adjourn.
Mm-hmm. I'd just like to say I think it was a great meeting, and thank you very much. It was great.
Ditto.
And with that, I will adjourn the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors to September 17, 2019, 3:30 p.m. in room 241.
A meeting adjourned for City of Charlottesville.
That was very good.